Welcome in. It's the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Michael Bruntz. Brian Christopherson joins me on a Monday. We are knees deep in the transfer portal cycle after a long, lengthy trip to Vegas and the bowl game. Brian, how are you recovering and holding up in the year 2026?
So far, so good. Probably not getting my 8 hours of sleep per night so far, but I'll try to average that out as we go on.
More importantly, have you blown through your gambling winnings yet? Sports gambling winnings.
I didn't end up winning. I was in the minus when we left. And for the record, neither of us are big gamblers. We did have a little fun, and it was more fun the one night, and then less fun the second night.
Yeah, New Hampshire screwed me. That was the takeaway from the trip. Didn't need that. So that's Vegas. Do we want to talk bowl game? Have we moved on from the bowl game? I feel like we're past that. Is that
we're
fair?
past it?
Is anything like sticking in your craw from what we saw?
No.
In Las Vegas. Nothing from that game does.
No, that's how that game lacked the firepower to stay with you beyond like 48 hours. It was just sort of a flat, disappointing, maybe it was kind of predictable when it was all said and done, how it went, but there's not enough on like January 5th to keep me. I can't even remember some of the sequences, just that Utah scored on like 6 straight possessions.
Was there anything though in that game that like pushing it forward going into the portal piece of things here? Like, was that game clarifying for you in any way of like, okay, Nebraska really needs to get better in X, Y, and Z. There's probably PQRS as well for where they need to get better. But like, give me like 2 areas coming out of that game where you're like, okay, this needs to really change.
I thought the most interesting thing was their talk in the post game from Rule that they actually were shifting direction already toward Orich's defense somewhat, and with that I think there was some communication struggles, but also in that discussion I don't think sometimes we've talked enough about the linebacker spot and how that needs to upgrade. And I know there's some young guys who can have their say as second-year players, and Shavers played half the season with one hand. I get all that. But that's where, as we'll get to the portal talk, you need like an Owen Chambliss, or you need 2 or 3, I think, guys maybe that really stir the drink and make that competition take off. You got to have some playmakers. The third down thing, like in the red zone, that actually would have been, if we're going to talk seriously about the game, it would have been like 16-14 at half if you stop them on a 3rd and 20 or the 3rd and 9 where Dampier walked in from 11 yards out. Just 2 plays which are favorable to you down and distance. And if you have the playmakers, you get a little heat. I know he's tough to wrangle, but you at least put the heat on him, and it's not so easy, and you force an incompletion, whatever. You force 3 points. That's probably a different type of game. I'm not saying Nebraska wins it or anything, but it would have been interesting maybe to the 4th quarter if you get those type of plays. But it sort of set how it was going to go when you can't do that. The red zone defense was bad to the end, and we can connect this to the portal talk. Like, you've got to have some havoc makers on defense on those plays where it's money time. You get off the field, you hold them to 3, and Nebraska just does not have enough of them. And so that's how I connect that to what we're talking about now in this 2-week cycle.
What about quarterback? I think I was thinking about this, and that game was kind of oddly clarifying. I think if there was any doubt that Nebraska needed to go get at least 1 guy, if not 2, that you're going to, put towards the top of your quarterback competition or give every opportunity to win the job for going into the portal cycle. Like, they got Kenny Minchey, the Notre Dame transfer. That was a guy that they zeroed in on for more than a week. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, when Dana Holgerson was talking about things happening quickly, that's who he was talking about.
Right.
But I mean, I think if anything, November was certainly clarifying, but I think the bowl game kind of showed like, look, Nebraska's got to upgrade at quarterback. Like, you got to find an answer there in the portal.
I didn't think TJ played particularly well, and I think he would say the same. Now, I do wonder how much the hamstring injury, kind of affecting him throughout December, and if that's sort of on your mind as you're playing that game, impacted it. I thought it really slowed his momentum that he might have had in these 4 starts, because he kind of had it after the UCLA game. Penn State, you could maybe throw away as well as just a rough night on the road against a very talented team. But it was kind of a disappointing, and you got to remember, he's only started 4 games. He's in the competition, and that's what I'm looking forward to as we have this conversation is we're going to have an actual QB competition for the first time. I think we are texting about it since 2018, you'd say, with Adrian Martinez and Tristan Chebbia, who then left the first week of the season.
Briefly, Patrick O'Brien was also involved in that one.
Yeah, you guys have heard about Patrick, though, right? Yeah. He's not here anymore. That's how we found out from Mario Verduzco. But yeah, I thought it was sort of a disappointing game for TJ. There was a play. We are getting into the game now, where there's sort of the play in the flat to, I think it was Mekhi Nelson or Mosey, and he overshot it. And I think it's a first down if he hits it or close to it. And that was after they had the 2 drives. And it's those kind of plays that in a game like that, especially against a score-heavy offense like Utah, you can't back down at all. And so we already knew, though, before the game that Minchey was probably the guy. Like, it was on our board and all that stuff. That's just the way that this thing works now. And so that was going to happen regardless. The competition is going to go on regardless, and TJ Lateef can grow from it, and he can have a good fight with it, and you want him to be around and have that fight. Like, that's important too for Nebraska. But I think your point in the question you're asking is well taken. Like, Nebraska's got to get more out of that position, whoever it may be.
So we know it's Kenny Minchey. He was committed, I guess, yesterday on Sunday afternoon, kind of in a, it's funny. Like you had like a group of quarterbacks that just kind of moved into the portal together when it opened. And now you had like a group of quarterbacks within about an hour that just, pick their destination. And
you know what it's like, Bruntz? You know what it's like? It's like Jurassic Park. Yeah. Herds. They do move in herds.
Yeah, they're testing the fences.
Yeah.
But Kenny Minchey is the guy, Notre Dame transfer. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. It's an interesting commitment for a number of reasons. More of a dual threat look, not necessarily like he can run for sure, but I think he's also an accomplished passer. I mean, I don't think you need to overlook that, but not a huge body of work in college, I think, is probably the one thing that people are pointing to right now is this is, maybe a high ceiling pickup, but just not a lot of track record here to go off of. He was 20 of 26 this year. Good numbers there, 196 yards, lost a quarterback competition to CJ Carr that by most reports from Notre Dame folks, it was pretty neck and neck. But Carr ended up getting the job. And now Nebraska's going with Kenny Minchey, who certainly talented, by all accounts, a guy that's a pretty good leader, a good locker room guy, but not a huge body of work to go off of. What do you make of this?
Yeah, the first thing, I said it when I wrote my takes out, I understand this whole offseason, people are not going to want to be fed just, sunshine, lollipops, rainbows, whatever. They just don't want it right now. They want to see it proven when it counts. So I want to balance that. I like the pickup on the surface for a few reasons. I think Nebraska, because of some of the things we were talking about previously, has a lot of spots on this roster that it needs to improve. Now we'll see if they actually do it or not. But I also think with them needing probably 2 quarterbacks in this portal cycle, wouldn't you agree that it could make sense financially to not blow your wad on just that one guy who might be the answer, but he might not, right? Like we've kind of seen that, and I'm not here to have a whole was Dylan Ryle worth the price tag, but that's sort of what I mean. That's every quarterback who's going anywhere. Like Sorsby at Texas Tech, it's going to be judged at some point. Like, well, was that really worth it or not? And of course, they've got like monopoly money down there right now, so they can do that sort of stuff. Nebraska's got money too, but I get where you don't want to like overreach, even though it is the most important position in sports. If you think a guy has high upside and he can get you about to where some of these other guys are, and maybe he can, maybe their evaluation on him is, after doing like some deep research, is we actually think this guy will be very close in this, playing field, the sandbox of some of these other guys everyone's talking about. You brought it up a week or two ago, like Sam Leavitt was an example. When he first left Michigan State, no one really thought much of him. Like I thought he was okay. It wasn't like everybody was clamoring about his name or anything. And he turned out to be like a hot quarterback now, as like a portal name. And so I think that's what you're hoping for with Minchey. You weigh that with the fact that you're right. I think he's played like 107 snaps in his college career or something like that. And Latif has more experience, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned Leavitt. So his first year at Michigan State, he was 15 of 23 for 139, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I mean, it's, largely mop-up duty. I think that's, kind of the direction that Nebraska wanted to go, was to find a guy that was kind of more on the upswing a little bit. I mean, I think you're going to see him add another quarterback, just the way that quarterback room is now. I mean, you're probably looking at maybe a D2 type guy, somebody with some experience, maybe at a little bit of a lower level, to kind of come in and fill out that room a little bit. Also compete, sure, but that's probably the profile you're looking at. One benefit, I guess, of him not throwing that many collegiate passes was it's pretty easy to watch every throw he made last year at Notre Dame. The thing I found interesting about that too was like Notre Dame's up like 56 points on Syracuse, and they're still throwing the ball late in the fourth quarter, which I don't know how that probably went over there, but that's neither here nor there. But I think in those limited throws, I mean, you saw a guy that places the ball pretty well. He's got enough arm strength to make things work, and not, again, he's not a burner, but he's a guy that can get outside the pocket and kind of make things happen with his feet a little bit, and also do a little bit of the designed run stuff. Like, I don't think you're going to see, whatever this offense looks like in 2026, I don't think you're going to see a quarterback running the ball like, designed 15 times. That just feels like way too much. But I think that you're going to have the threat, either with Latif or with Minchey, of a guy that, teams at least have to respect the fact that he's going to do something if he breaks out of the pocket and breaks contained. So, I think another maybe factor working for him, he's been in an elite program that's played a lot of big games. I think there's probably a little bit of benefit for that, but I agree. I mean, the thing that makes it a little bit tough, and what's going to make it tough over the next 8 months until we get to fall camp, is you just don't have a huge body of work to go off of. And I don't get the sense that this is a fan base right now that's A, patient, or B, wants to at least consider the what ifs a lot, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You want your quarterback to be top tier. Also, there might be something to be said for an off season where we're not just like gushing or talking about what this one guy could be, and it's all about this one guy, like sort of, I think there could be some use to that for this team right now, and sort of building up every position, because every position needs to upgrade and needs some work. That's clear. And so maybe that'll be beneficial in its own way. I mean, you stated it well. Those are the pros and cons of it. You just don't have a lot to guarantee anything about Minchey. He sort of fits a slight change of direction, I would say, from Ryle, and some of the stuff you can do. As you say, he's not going to be like a full force QB run game, but you could do some stuff with it, like sample it 4 or 5 times in a game, and Jeep Wade is going to have ideas off stuff that they did. Obviously, Haynes King was a different type of QB. He was a great runner.
Yeah.
But I think they can take some of that and apply it to the skill sets of the 2 quarterbacks we know about at the moment. And also, that was a legitimate competition at Notre Dame. Like, I was going back through and reading it, and maybe they deep down, the coaches knew where they were aiming, but at least in practice and publicly, they were getting like 50-50 reps till like 1 or 2 weeks before that season. Marcus Freeman, if he was on camera, so maybe he's going to play it for the camera, but he said it was one of the hardest decisions he's had to make as a coach. And CJ Carr did all right, so the fact that Minchey pushed him to the brink like that is probably a good sign. And it also means that he got a ton of snaps. So he doesn't have the game experience, but he might know quite a lot. And I would guess Holgerson and Glenn Thomas are kind of banking on that.
Your point, I think, that kind of needs to be highlighted too is, when you're talking about, how making the portal season about one guy, this Nebraska roster has a long shopping list right now in the transfer portal for what they need to get done. Potentially a running back. I mean, I think, they would take a wide receiver. They've got Quasi Gilmer, the UCLA transfer, visiting on Monday. Offensive line, I think, is another place where, you need to make sure you retain Pritchett, who is playing pretty good football by the end of things. Justin Evans is another piece of that you want to make sure you lock up. And then beyond that, I mean, I was kind of typing through what the kind of offensive line outlook looks like, especially with a couple of guys that have moved out and hit the portal already. And you're going to need at least probably 3 guys at least, probably more than that, just to kind of get to that point where you feel like you've got 6-7 guys that are veteran guys that you feel pretty good about, and hope that Jeep Wade and Lonnie Teasley can bulk things up a little bit with some of the guys that are already on your roster. That sophomore class of Bricks, Peters, Pyle, and Talmua, that feels like a pretty important group to me going into this one. But I think you do need to find some kind of top end guys to replace what you've got there. So,
yep.
I mean, the offensive side of the ball, there's a lot of those needs. Plus, as you said, I mean, linebacker is a big one. Defensive line, just based on where Nebraska's kind of been active so far with trying to bring guys in, that's a big piece of it. And certainly safety. I mean, I think you've got to bring in a safety or two to kind of make things work. So this portal cycle is not about Kenny Minchey. I mean, it's a huge piece of it, but you gotta, I mean, we've seen what happens when you're not good enough around a quarterback that's really well regarded. And I think that's kind of the challenge for Nebraska as they get into this.
Yeah. As you were talking through the O-line, I was thinking it's a little bit like Noah's Ark. It's got to come in 2, at least. You got to have Evans and Pritchett, that 2 return. You got to have 2 from the group you mentioned of that class, at least. I'm saying at least 2.
Yeah.
But I wanted to use my Noah's Ark theme.
Yeah.
With Bricks and those guys, Tamua, 2 of those guys, and then at least 2 portal hits. And I'm not saying maybe you do need like 3 or whatever. But if you had that combination, then you're cooking with something. So had a couple visitors over the weekend on the O-line, and it's just the first wave. So you gotta see what transpires next. Like, there's interesting names, as you mentioned, connected to both these coaches, Wade and Teasley. Like, was it Harrison Moore, who popped in the portal from Georgia Tech, recently? There's names you want to keep an eye on. But Tree Babalade came in. He was at South Carolina with Teasley. He's kind of a swing tackle guy. Started his true freshman year at left tackle, was actually a reserve to start last year, but then started kind of in the middle of the year and played at right tackle. He reminds me a little bit. I don't want to say he has as much upside as Pritchett, but sort of in the sense that, like, if you get all into the PFF weeds and stuff, you're going to be like, it's all right. but it might not knock your socks off. He did, however, play some of his better ball against like playoff type teams, so that's a good sign. And Brendan Black from Iowa State could also have.
You want a breaking news?
Yeah, give me some breaking news.
Brendan Black, the interior offensive lineman from Iowa State who visited over the weekend, has committed. So there's a piece. We'll see if they get your Noah's Ark thing and get somebody with him. But they've got one important piece and a guy that I think very experienced. Played a lot at Iowa State over his 3 years there. And, I mean, you look at what Nebraska kind of did at guard in the bowl game. I mean, it was Tyler Kanak, who's more of a swing player, starting at guard. And then he actually moved out to tackle in the middle of that game. Henry Lutovsky's gone. Jason Machachok, who was number 2 on the depth chart, he's moved on. So, getting a veteran guy to kind of, it's almost like the Rocco Spindler role, a guy that's experienced that can kind of be a mauler on the interior. I mean, that was a good need and one that we conveniently were just talking through as things popped here.
Yeah, it is a good need. Played a ton of snaps at Iowa State. Can fit into sort of that, I think, Spindler role, sort of at right guard. Obviously you're going to have to fight for it, but I think he was one they identified, obviously, right away that they wanted as one of the top guys on their board to bring him in, the first weekend. So you got the top. Minchey was the top QB on their board. There's no doubt about it. And Black, I think, was up there as far as lineman goes. So, people can dissect it how they want to, but I think as far as the guys that they're looking at in their war room, they probably got 2 guys they're very high
on. Nebraska's kind of been moving guys through over the last couple days, visitor-wise. Owen Chambliss, the San Diego State linebacker, I think is a really key one that Nebraska's in a good spot for right now. Dexter Foster, the linebacker from Oregon State, kind of intrigues me. He's finishing up his visit on Monday as well. Any of those kind of defensive guys that intrigue you that they've had through here that are pretty important in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to have to obviously hit on some D lineman types. We've mentioned sort of the linebackers with like Chambliss. I think Hawthorne at linebacker real quick, who Nebraska almost got a cycle ago, but he was kind of an Ames, Iowa boy. Like he just grew up around there and knew Matt Campbell so well. I mean, I think he's a nice, like, competitive piece that you could add, who was visiting. I can't say I know a ton about like Dexter Foster's game or not playing at Oregon State. I just didn't see him, but he was trending up, and Rob Orich actually, I'm pretty sure, like, recruited him at one point, like back when, like, his Idaho days at least. And so there is a connection. Some of this stuff goes back where a coach like knows, like, this guy has traits and stuff I've liked for 2 or 3 years, and they've kept an eye on him, and that's why they're here now. And so don't discount that. This isn't just research that happened even in the last 6 months for some of these guys. Like it could be something with Orich that he goes back to when he knew this kid when he was 17 years old and has watched him sort of, from afar. So that's something you got to keep in mind before making any like big takes. Like, I think this guy's got it or he doesn't have it. There's an evaluation process that's pretty deep.
So Nebraska will continue hosting transfer portal targets throughout the week. Classes start in Lincoln on the 11th, 12th, whatever that Monday is. And then kind of the last day to get guys into school is the Tuesday after Martin Luther King weekend. So going to be a very, very busy next couple weeks here for the Nebraska staff. As you also start getting coaches out on the road that can recruit for 27 and beyond during January. So plenty to talk about there. Let's do Nebraska basketball. We haven't talked Husker hoops. The still undefeated Nebraska basketball team wins a little bit differently over Michigan State the other night to stay undefeated. third straight win over a top team when they've had the chance to do it. That's not bad. Probably looking at a top 10 Nebraska team when the AP poll comes out here in a little bit. Brian Christopherson, what have you made of what'd you make of that Michigan State game? Like, that was a rock fight, and Nebraska was ready for it.
That's what made it kind of cool, is that they beat Michigan State in a rock fight, because that's one of the programs that is so special at winning games like that. And like, Izzo was coaching his butt off too, like he always does, but that was like Izzo, like in trying to improve your seating in March on the sideline, like they were into that game and wanted to win it very badly. It's their only shot at Nebraska this year. They're obviously trying to win the Big Ten crown again. So to take them out in a game where you don't shoot it gangbusters is really quite an accomplishment. This defense just continues to be very active and play at a higher level than I ever would have guessed going into the season. And you got to give a lot of credit to Nate Lenzer for how he's sort of orchestrated their game plans, but then the guys are executing it really well. And I could tell early on, you knew, like in the first few minutes, Nebraska was going to cause havoc on that end. Michigan State turned it over 19 times. Some of them were unforced, but Nebraska was in their heads a little bit. And the environment, of course, was insane. Like Bruntz, when the kid shot the free throws with 0.7 of a second, you can expect how loud it might be. I've never heard Pinnacle Bank Arena as loud as it was as he got the ball to shoot that free throw. It was just incredible. I think in a normal circumstance he might have made 2, but it was like, nah, not going to happen in that environment. So it's going to be tough to, there's going to be a time where they're going to lose a couple in a row. This is a tough week, and I hope people like at least look at the long view when even if there's like a 2 or 3 game scuffle at some point. Just keep in mind, like, they're in a good spot now. They've built up a lot of capital that's going to be useful. Obviously, you want to keep this going, but don't overreact if there's a bad game on the road. And I'm saying that because this week worries me. Ohio State and Indiana, I think they're tough games away from Lincoln, and I just don't want to see people go into that mode where they're acting like it's football in 1996 again, where if you lose a game, everything's crap suddenly. It just remember which sport we're watching and the marathon here.
Yeah, people need to kind of keep in mind. I mean, the Big Ten schedule is such just like a road grader, and especially on it's very, very difficult to win on the road in the conference. I think when they go to Minnesota, at Rutgers, I mean, those are 2 that you could probably point to as gettable. At Northwestern, I mean, beyond that, it's just going to be, I mean, even the late year West Coast swing to USC and UCLA, I mean, that's tough. Yeah. Just with where it falls on the schedule, of you're kind of starting to think about tournament, Big Ten tournament seeding, everything else. And, oh, by the way, you got to go spend, 4 days in LA and play 2 games or whatever the stretch is. I mean, it's Nebraska's kind of in that time right now where you defend home court, you try to get a few on the road, and just with the early season work that they've done, I mean, that's a pretty good resume if you can get that kind of work done over the rest of the season here.
It was amazing that they went 10-0 2 years ago at home, but if they can do even if it's like an 8-2 at home, 9-1 would be, I think like 9-1 or better would be an awesome goal, but like even 8-2 at home or something like that, and you steal 4 or 5 on the road, which is possible. I'd sign up for that. Now they might have bigger plans, and right now, go for it. Like, I mean, this team has shown a willingness to just move on right after a big win. You heard the post game. Rink Mass and Jamarcus Lawrence, they weren't mad about the court storming. It was just they were making a point, though, that they expect in that locker room to win that kind of game. They're older guys. They've been around. They think they're a very good team. They're playing like a very good team. It's not a surprise to them that they beat Michigan State. They would have been disappointed had it gone the other direction. And so I thought there was a good emphasis that hopefully people don't lose track of that. That wasn't like to me, it wasn't a court storming debate. It was more of a like, we think we're that kind of team now, that we're on that level where it's like, Tom Izzo kind of said they should do that. They're building, and he was being nice, but they think they're beyond that with who they have on this roster. That we're supposed to win at PBA. So I like that. Now this will be tricky. This podcast will come out and the game will tip off shortly after. So some people might hear it and already know the result. Ohio State's been a tough place for Nebraska over the years. It's an early evening start. It's off 2 days rest. There's a lot of factors that concern me, but if there's one team that I've covered with this Husker basketball that could do it, it's these guys, because they do just move on. It seems like right afterward in their locker room.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was kind of the similar attitude to how they quickly moved on in December. After the Creighton game, it was Creighton leading into Wisconsin, right? There was absolutely no Fred within 5 minutes of that game ending was on Big Ten Network talking about how they had a 2-day prep to go to Ohio State. There's just such the team has kind of taken on that approach, which I think you have to have. I mean, that's part of the Big Ten meat grinder is you think you win a big game, you can't be patting yourself on the back or you're going to get your ass kicked the next night.
Mm-hmm.
The next time out when you have to go on the road and play a good team or something like that. So it's, I cringe at the court storming discussion. It does not matter to me what's one iota. I have no, I don't get preachy about it. As somebody that's covered football games over the last 20 years and almost got knocked over by fans storming the field from Columbia, Missouri to the Twin Cities to wherever else, storm away. I don't care. It's really not. Is it a bad look? So that's part of being a fan. And by the way, Nebraska basketball hasn't been here before. So but anyways, that's more than I need to probably waste on it. But I do think the approach is one that is mature and will help them as they kind of get deeper into conference play when you're having to constantly reset for good or for bad. If you go out and lose, you got to be able to kind of have the same approach and pick yourself up off the mat and get back to work.
Yep, exactly. I mean, that it is that old school team, though. It's an old team with guys who are just 4th, 5th year guys. The thing they do really well within a game is they do not let a little 4-6-0 run by the other team derail their confidence or woe is us. This is how this game's going. They are very good about they put a 10-0 run on Michigan State when it got to 47-38 when Frager hit the 3 and then had the technical, which was much over discussed. Another thing that was over discussed. But what they do not let happen is 10-0 runs usually come against them. Now, knock on wood. But it's been a rare thing. So they're very good about putting out fires pretty fast. And that's a maturity about them. So it's just been an amazing start to the season, though. You can look ahead and be realistic that there's going to be potholes you're going to hit, while also saying this is the best start they've ever had historically. They had a non-conference undefeated mark for the first time in 97 years. I mean, there's stuff that's just unbelievable that they've accomplished, and it happens at a great time for Husker athletics after disappointing how volleyball didn't quite get it done, and obviously how football flamed out at the end of the year. So people need this pick-me-up, I think.
Yeah, we'll see if Nebraska can continue. Nebraska basketball can keep carrying shouldering the burden of a state's emotions tonight against Ohio State. Anything else, Brian, before we get out of here and get back to portal tracking?
Yeah, we'll go write our stuff, and then we could do another pod, and maybe someone else will commit. So maybe that's what we need to do for the folks.
Just sit on this stream talking all day.
Yeah.
That's Brian Christopherson. I'm Michael Bruntz. This is the Husker247 Podcast. We got tons on the site, lots of portal news, comings and goings, We didn't even get it to some of the departures, but that's on the site. Keona Davis, probably the most noteworthy one of the guys I've entered in the last few days here. But that's all at Husker 24/7. We'll have Husker 24/7 daily on Tuesday, so make sure you're there for that. And thanks for listening.